You're about to make the dumbest trade in the galaxy, Jace said calmly, staring down the barrel of a plasma rifle held by a creature twice his size. The slaver captain barked a laugh and signaled the crew to haul him inside the ship. They had no idea he wasn't bargaining for freedom. He was buying them time to be hunted. The trade market on Archon 4 wasn't a place for pleasantries. It smelled of burnt iron and betrayal. Dock hands moved with their eyes low and mouths shut, while buyers, smugglers, mercs, scavengers, bartered for everything from biofuel to organic weapons. And today, the prized cargo was human. Not just any human. Jace Wade. Age 22. Earthborn, Outer Rim trained, survivalist by necessity, dangerous by bloodline. When the slavers grabbed him off the broken satellite wreck field, they assumed he was some loner scrapper. He didn't resist. Didn't even flinch. He just stared at the stars like he was waiting for something. For them, that was a red flag. For him, it was a countdown. Jace sat in the holding cell on the slaver ship, his wrists bound with low-voltage restraints. He didn't bother testing them. Not yet. The ship was old, Vraxian tech, probably salvaged by criminals who barely understood the interface. The engines whined too loudly during thrust, and the air vents rattled when they hit jump speeds. That meant the insulation was cracked. And that meant this ship could be broken again. Jace leaned back, smirked, and shut his eyes. The slaver captain, a hulking creature with eyes that blinked sideways and a voice that sounded like gravel gargling water, stomped toward the cell. He peered in with one oversized eye. "You're quiet, human. Usually your kind screams more. Or pleads." Jace yawned. "I'd offer you something clever, but I'm saving my best lines for your funeral." The captain slammed the bars with the back of his claw. "You think this is a joke?" "No," Jace said, looking straight into the eye. "I think you just took a hostage with 3 predators tracking his scent." Back on Earth, Jace's brothers were legends. His eldest, Colin, was a fleet tactician for Earth's Naval Command, capable of blockading entire trade routes with 3 ships and a bad mood. The middle one, Royce, operated with Black Ops Recon, known in the files only by his call sign, Ghost. And the third was Jace himself. The runt, the quiet one, the one the galaxy never noticed because he was always hidden behind bigger shadows. Which made him the perfect bait. Colin got the signal first. A code sent through a microburst relay hidden in Jace's wrist bone, something their father had built when they were kids. 1 pulse. Meaning taken. 2 pulses. Meaning not by choice. The moment that signal hit Colin's comms, he stopped his fleet mid-drill and ordered every fighter back to dock. Royce received the signal 30 seconds later while deep behind enemy lines on an espionage op. He smiled, threw a flash bang into the enemy command room, and disappeared into the shadows with a grin. Operation Ember had been activated. Meanwhile, Jace made his move. The slavers were too lazy to reset patrols in the ship corridors, relying on cheap surveillance drones. Jace timed their sweep intervals. He waited until the hum passed once, then twice, and on the 3rd pass he moved. The restraints weren't strong. Just annoying. He twisted his wrists, popped the latch using the tip of his boot, and dropped to the floor silently. In 3 minutes he was out of the cell and inside the ventilation shafts, already mapping the ship by scent and sound. His brothers had trained him well. The slaver crew was 10 strong. All armed. All cocky. One had a toothpick. Another wore a helmet indoors for no reason. Jace counted them all through the vent slits. He whispered their positions to himself. Hallway. Reactor room. Cockpit. Cargo bay. He smiled. Then he started rewiring the lights. The first glitch was subtle. A flicker in the hallway. The slaver guarding the armory tapped the side panel but ignored it. The second was a complete blackout on Deck 2. That triggered a mild alarm, but their lazy engineer brushed it off as junk wiring. By the time the 3rd blackout hit, accompanied by doors randomly locking and unlocking, the slaver captain started to sweat. One crewman mentioned rumors. About Earthlings. About those who don't fight back right away. About those who wait. The captain shut him up with a growl. Down in the cargo bay, Jace activated the override and opened 6 additional holding cells, freeing a collection of prisoners from 5 different species. Some collapsed. Others ran. One just laughed and jumped straight into a vent. Jace didn't care. He wasn't there to save everyone. He was there to distract the ship. And it worked. The captain sent 4 guards toward the cargo bay, 3 toward the engine room, and kept 2 near the bridge. That left a single one watching the prisoner's original cell. And Jace was already behind him. A sharp jolt from a stolen shock baton dropped the guard without a word. Jace took his weapon and comms device, set the corpse against the wall like it was napping, and whispered into the comm. "Still think I'm broken?" Back outside the ship, 3 warp signatures ripped space apart like wet paper. The slaver's scanners picked it up half a second too late. 3 ships. No flags. No registry. Just blaring ancient Earth rock music through open channels. The lead ship, sleek, black, and humming with energy, sent one message. He's not alone. On board the slaver bridge, the captain dropped his cigar. In the cell corridor, Jace was already gone. He sprinted through the dark, laughing under his breath, whispering to himself like he was counting backwards from something only he understood. The countdown had begun. And the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you steal a Wade. The first brother to break atmosphere was Colin. His ship, the Obsidian Mark, wasn't designed to look threatening. It just naturally terrified anyone who saw it approaching. Its hull was blackened from plasma streaks and silent space kills, with no visible insignias, no blinking lights, just a mad vessel gliding through space like a predator beneath still water. Inside, Colin stood at the helm, arms crossed, reading the slaver ship's specs. Every weakness jumped out at him like highlighted targets. Its aft thrusters were misaligned, its shields were rigged for defense but not rerouting, and most importantly, its crew had no backup. That told him everything. They were amateurs with toys. Now they were cornered by professionals. Royce arrived seconds later. He didn't dock. He didn't even bother sending a greeting. He just ejected from his stealth cruiser in a free-fall suit and landed on the back of the slaver ship like a fallen ghost. The man was a shadow with bones. Where Colin was precise and methodical, Royce was chaos disguised as calm. He moved like he'd already rehearsed this invasion 100 times. Using magnetic boots, he stalked the outer hull, dropped 2 explosive discs near the rear propulsion, and sent a silent signal to Colin. Detonation pending. Royce knew better than to assume Jace was safe. But he also knew better than to assume Jace was helpless. Their baby brother was many things. Helpless was never one of them. The third arrival wasn't a ship. It was a signal from an orbital relay station 2 sectors away. A temporary override flooded all nearby channels with a warning, "Vacate this system immediately." That message was signed with a single letter, W. Anyone who'd been in the outer systems long enough knew what that meant. The Wade family wasn't just a group of well-trained humans. They were a war response team with a personal vendetta and no leash. Their father had taught them not to start fights. But if one started, they ended it so thoroughly that no one even remembered how it began. Inside the slaver's ship, the crew began to argue. The captain paced, fur bristling along his back, tusks twitching with frustration. His comms officer said there were now 3 human ships in orbit, one of which was jamming outgoing signals. The other 2 were closing in without even requesting identification. That wasn't standard military behavior. That was revenge. Panic set in among the crew. 2 of the guards refused to return to their posts, demanding they abandon the cargo and escape. The captain growled a threat and shot one of them in the leg. The other one shut up. But the fear in the air was thicker than any command barked in anger. They knew something was coming. And they had no name for it. Jace, meanwhile, had reached the reactor level. He wasn't sabotaging it. Not yet. He was using the warmth from the core to mask his body heat from motion sensors while tapping into the system's internal cameras. From a stolen panel near the wall, he watched as his brothers breached the perimeter. Colin had hacked the outer doors, Royce was walking through the ventilation like a wind with knives, and the rest of the ship was responding like a kicked beehive. Jace smiled. This was the plan all along. He was the bait. He didn't even need to be rescued. He just needed to make the mistake of being taken. The slaver captain finally reached the cargo bay with 2 loyal crew members, stepping over broken doors and flickering lights. His voice roared through the ship, demanding the prisoner be returned to his cell, that the humans retreat, that negotiations begin. No one answered. The air just got colder. One of the guards muttered a prayer to some local deity. The other checked the shadows too many times. Neither noticed the vent grate shift behind them. Royce dropped from the ceiling without a sound, snapped both guards' necks before they could scream, and caught the captain in a headlock before he could aim his weapon. The captain writhed, thrashed, and kicked, but Royce just whispered in his ear, calm and dry. You picked the wrong planet. You picked the wrong species. And you definitely picked the wrong family. Colin entered through the far side a moment later, scanning the area with military precision. He locked the doors behind him, tapped into the command console, and uploaded a virus that disabled the ship's comms, navigation, and life support failsafes. They weren't killing the crew. Not yet. They were making a point. The universe wasn't scared of humans anymore. That was a mistake that needed correcting. Jace stepped out from the dark corridor and met his brothers in the middle of the bay. Royce gave him a nod. Colin raised an eyebrow and looked him over. You good? Jace nodded. I got a few bruises and some real strong opinions about slaver food, but yeah. I'm good. Colin half smiled. Royce tossed him a stolen plasma rifle. Jace caught it midair like he'd been waiting all day. Then let's clean this place up. They moved like synchronized elements of a storm. Royce took the high paths, eliminating security nodes and vent crawlers with flash-quiet bursts. Colin moved through the command wing like a shadow with purpose, locking doors and disabling control panels. Jace went straight to the prisoner cells and released everyone still conscious. He didn't make speeches. He just handed out weapons and pointed toward exits. The slaver crew tried to rally. They tried to form a perimeter. One of them even activated an auto-turret system. It fired once, then sparked, turned sideways, and exploded, thanks to a remote overload Colin triggered from his wrist pad. The next wave of guards charged the command center, only to find Royce waiting for them with 2 energy blades and a grenade that sucked the oxygen out of the room. It was over in 30 seconds. By the time the remaining slavers realized they'd lost, the Wades had already taken over the ship. Jace pulled up the controls, glanced at his brothers, and said the words that made all of them smirk the exact same way their father used to. So, do we burn it? Or do we make it a message? Royce leaned over, punched a command into the NAV console, and rerouted the slaver's ship to the center of the nearest trade station. Colin activated the beacon. Jace hit record on the external feed. Then he turned to the slaver captain, still bound on the floor, and smiled one last time. You said we scream a lot. Funny thing is, I don't think you've started screaming yet. The ship entered warp, leaving behind a silence that would echo through the galaxy. The slaver's ship dropped out of warp with smoke trailing from its engines and emergency lights flickering across its hull. Docking ports at Vornix Station began to scramble as the battered vessel approached without clearance codes, its weapons powered down, but its override beacon screaming across every channel. Authorities tried to hail it, but no voice answered. All they got was a silent broadcast looped on every screen in the control room, a grainy feed showing the inside of the ship's command deck. There were no bodies, no blood, no panic. Just a single human, young, calm, leaning back in the captain's chair, spinning the slaver's ornate command medallion between his fingers. The message underneath the video read one line. He was never alone. Security forces at the station hesitated. Slaver ships came in all the time, usually to offload cargo or smuggle new stock. But this felt different. The silence was calculated. The smoke was staged. And the warning didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a lesson. When the first boarding crews stepped onto the slaver ship, they expected chaos. What they found was order. Every corridor had been stripped of weapons. Every holding cell had been opened. Every camera was rewired to play footage of the Wade brothers walking calmly through the ship like it belonged to them. And in the center of the cargo bay stood the slaver captain, alive, restrained to a wall with his own chains, gagged and wide-eyed, surrounded by a circle of activated drones projecting one sentence over and over. Humans are not prey. Words spread across Fornix like fire. Dockworkers filmed the interior. Traders took holos. Black market dealers quietly removed any human listings from their databases. And smugglers who'd once bragged about taking Earth captives now closed their mouths and slipped out of the station. The Wade brothers didn't make announcements. They didn't issue threats. They simply left behind undeniable proof that they'd arrived, taken over, and departed without asking anyone's permission. Up in orbit, the three Wade ships regrouped. Jace sat at the co-pilot's seat in Colin's ship, sipping some kind of bitter alien coffee and watching the footage spread through Galactic forums. Roy stood behind him, arms crossed, not saying much, but clearly amused by the reactions. Colin stayed focused on the navigational panel, plotting new jumps and watching the security feeds coming from Fornix. "You think they get the message yet?" Jace asked, nodding at a clip being shared across pirate networks showing the slaver captain crying on the floor as a drone played Earth lullabies in reverse. Roy shrugged. "They will when they realize no one's going to buy from them again. Or sell to them." Colin added without looking up, "They'll get the message when someone tries to retaliate and disappears." They didn't wait for thanks. They didn't dock. They just let the station chew on what happened and quietly prepared for extraction. But the reaction was already bigger than they expected. Within hours, Allied channels from 3 nearby systems began transmitting data logs and visual IDs of suspected slaver routes. A whistleblower from a cartel ring leaked the location of a human trafficking auction planned 2 sectors away. A resistance group from the fringe zones offered alliance. Even a few bounty hunters sent encrypted messages, not to challenge the Wades, but to warn them which systems were rigged with traps. Jace leaned back and stared at the stars again. He wasn't used to being the trigger. His brothers usually operated with clean plans and high command approvals. But this time had been different. They hadn't called in favors. They hadn't requested backup. They'd answered the signal personally. Because that's what brothers do. Not just soldiers. Not just trained operatives. Brothers. Still, Jace knew they weren't done. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a ripple. And ripples don't stop, they build into something bigger. He watched another message come in, this one untraceable, just a voice recording. "You've made enemies, Earthlings. You won't always be lucky. We'll find your kind again. You can't guard them all." Colin played it on loop twice, then deleted it without a word. Royce cracked his knuckles. Jace just exhaled and stood up. "Then let them come. Because next time, we won't send a message. We'll send a crater." Down below, Fornix's black market hub imploded socially. One trader was dragged out of his stall for trying to auction off Terran medical gear. Another got stabbed by a rival gang for claiming he knew a safe route past Earth patrols. The whole underground network was in freefall, not because Earth had shown up with fleets or diplomacy, but because 3 humans had taken back one of their own and filmed it like a training exercise. They hadn't brought an army. They'd brought family. And somehow, that was more terrifying. Royce decided to use that fear. From the outer terminal of Colin's ship, he broadcast a short-wave signal on a closed loop known to slaver guilds. No threats, no noise. Just coordinates. Coordinates to a graveyard planet in the Vex belt. A warning. The message attached simply read, "This is where we'll be if you want to test us again." It was a trap, of course. A perfectly rigged, sensor-cloaked system with dead satellites, and cloaked mines and thermal mirrors to hide ships. But it wasn't meant to lure anyone. It was meant to be a psychological hole in the map. A place pirates would whisper about. A name that would grow teeth in the shadows. Later, Jace stepped out into the viewing bay and watched a debris cloud drift past. It glittered in the light of the nearby sun, the pieces still fresh from the ship his brothers had detonated earlier. No survivors. No scraps worth salvaging. Just a floating tomb with no signal. He sipped his bitter drink again and smiled. Royce joined him, setting down a pack of dried rations. Colin stayed at the helm. They didn't need to talk much. The bond between them wasn't made of words. It was built through years of scraped knuckles, tactical drills, and late nights fixing bruised egos with inside jokes. Their father once told them that no enemy scares a man who knows his family will come for him. And now the galaxy knew what that looked like. As the Wade ships prepared to vanish into warp again, one final message uploaded itself into every known pirate relay, bouncing from one server to another like a glitch with purpose. No voice. No faces. Just text. You took one of ours. We took everything from you. Try again, and we won't leave anything left to warn the others. The message ended. The stars blinked. And the hunt continued. The footage of the slavers' ship's capture exploded across the outer systems within hours. It didn't start on the major networks. It began in whispers, on encrypted pirate forums and scavenger chat threads, spreading like a virus. Someone had uploaded the full interior recordings from the ship's surveillance system. It was grainy at first, then stabilized, showing Jace calmly walking through the halls with a stolen rifle, disabling guards with silent strikes and clever traps. Then came Royce, falling from a ceiling vent like a ghost made of blades. Then Colin, overriding a command center with the ease of someone who'd memorized the ship's layout before ever stepping foot on it. The camera feeds caught everything. No screaming, no panic, just precision, confidence, and the quiet kind of vengeance that makes men disappear in their own corridors. By the time the final scene played out, Jace leaning in close to the slaver captain and whispering something before cutting the feed, the story had become legend. Pirate crews that once laughed about raiding human settlements now avoided any cargo tagged as Earth-made. Slaver rings blacklisted human prisoners out of fear they might be related to someone like the Wade brothers. Mercenaries who'd boasted about breaking Terran resistance turned off their trackers and rerouted entirely. The footage wasn't just a message. It was a mirror. One that made every criminal in the galaxy stare at their own reflection and ask if it was worth the risk. Inside a repurposed bunker on the outlaw station called Varen's Spine, a group of syndicate leaders met in secret. They sat in a dark room filled with smoke and paranoia, watching the video on a loop while arguing about what to do. One of them wanted to retaliate. Another demanded silence. A third suggested placing a bounty on each of the brothers. That comment was met with laughter, nervous, forced laughter, until one of the older members, a lizard-skinned smuggler with a data spike jammed into his skull, stood up and spoke. You don't place a bounty on ghosts. You don't chase men who already know you're coming. You leave the Wade family alone. Or you end up as part of the next lesson. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of truth. No one argued after that. Back aboard their ships, the brothers were already moving on. Jace was in Colin's engineering bay, sorting through confiscated slaver tech and tagging pieces for later inspection. Royce was checking weapon calibrations in the rear compartment, rerouting energy reserves and adjusting pulse ranges. Colin monitored transmission traffic, picking up the exact moment their footage hit the black market networks. He didn't smile. He didn't say anything. He just watched the spread like a surgeon watching a wound unravel. Jace finally spoke as he set down a strange three-pronged device that had been used to subdue prisoners. You know this isn't the end, right? We just told every slaver and cartel that we exist. Some of them will back down. Some of them will want revenge. Royce entered the room holding a data pad. He dropped it on the table with a thud. One of them already tried. A bounty was posted 30 minutes ago. It lasted 11 before someone took it down and burned the guy who wrote it into the system logs. Jace raised an eyebrow. Colin replied without looking up. We're not hunting for glory. We're ending a pattern. That kind of movement always shakes the floor. The datapad lit up again, another anonymous message blinking into their comms inbox. This one was different. It wasn't a threat or a plea. It was a request. A civilian freighter out of Sector 12 had gone dark. A crew of 12. for we're human. The last transmission included signs of a magnetic tether, the kind used by slaver scout ships to drag vessels into blind zones. No ransom. No trace. Just silence. Jace stared at the blinking message, the quiet hum of the ship's engines filling the room. Royce was already suiting up. Colin rerouted the NAV without waiting for discussion. The moment the coordinates locked, the ship turned with a purpose that could be felt in the floor panels. They didn't talk much after that. There was nothing to argue about. The choice had been made when Jace was taken. Everything after that was just follow-through. If another crew was gone, especially with humans on board, they weren't going to wait for a negotiation. They were going to bring the storm first. As they neared the blind zone, the scanners picked up irregularities. A magnetic pulse signature. Ionized trails of a disabled freighter. Jace recognized the model, a second-hand cargo vessel from Earth's outreach program, meant to help new colonies with supply chains. These weren't smugglers or mercs. These were good people. And someone had taken them. Colin cut engines and masked their signal. Royce loaded drones with sensor mines. Jace pulled up a holographic map and began calculating potential slaver exit routes. Every move was rehearsed. Every detail second nature. They weren't fighting a war. They were correcting a mistake. Then the signal flared again. Faint. A distress beacon buried in the static. It looped 2 words before cutting out. Human alive. They moved instantly. No hesitation. No debate. The freighter came into view an hour later, floating half-dead in the shadow of a mining moon. Its power was low. Life support critical. But the magnetic tether wasn't attached to it anymore. It was dragging something behind it. A second vessel. Small. Fast. Lightly armored. Colin magnified the image. Royce confirmed the shape. Jace smirked. They caught a slaver mid-pull. And the slaver didn't even know it yet. The Wade brothers initiated silent boarding protocols. Royce slipped in first, cutting through the rear hull with a thermal blade. Jace followed through the vents. Colin stayed behind, coordinating and locking down external escape options. Inside the slaver scout ship, 2 guards were asleep. The others were watching a holovid, laughing at something none of them would be laughing at in 5 minutes. Jace moved through the shadows like a rumor. Royce flipped off the lights. What happened next wasn't a fight. It was a reminder. 4 minutes later, the scout ship's doors burst open and the remaining freighter crew stumbled out. Alive. Shaken. But alive. Jace helped carry a wounded engineer. Royce dragged the slaver commander by the collar. Colin opened the bay doors and welcomed them all with silence. The freighter crew asked who they were. One of them recognized Jace from the footage. The rest just stared. Jace gave a simple answer. We're brothers. And no one takes from Earth without getting followed home. They returned to space, 1 more ship lost in the void, 1 more crew pulled back from the brink. The Wade brothers didn't celebrate. They didn't declare victory. They simply reloaded, recharged, and waited for the next signal. Because they weren't chasing justice. They were building fear. And fear, unlike threats, doesn't fade with time. It grows. The station known as Kirill's Edge didn't have laws, just agreements held together by bribes and threats. It was a place where fugitives disappeared, weapons changed hands without serials, and every corner hid a deal someone would kill for. It was also where a new rumor was born. A human family had declared war on slavers, and they weren't asking for alliances or parley. They just arrived, dismantled everything, and vanished again. No message, no slogan, just wreckage. The Wade brothers weren't names anymore. They were warnings. In a smoke-choked bar near the landing bays, a mercenary leaned across a rusted table and tried to sell coordinates to a contact from the Vorsk Syndicate. The buyer didn't move. He just stared at the datapad like it was poisoned. The mercenary insisted they were legitimate. He'd tracked the human brothers. He swore he'd seen their ships. He said they were heading toward the shard fields near Sector 13. The buyer stood up, walked out without saying a word, and left the datapad behind. 2 minutes later, he dumped it in a reactor core. Even the rumor of knowing their location was considered bad luck. Back in deep space, the Wade brothers drifted between systems, scanning traffic and intercepting fragmented distress calls. They weren't looking for revenge anymore. Revenge was a one-time response. This was strategy. They had mapped out 12 known slaver routes and 10 more suspected ones. Some were planetary, others mobile. But each had a pattern. They targeted weaker freighters, solo pilots, outer rim settlers. Anyone who wouldn't be missed quickly. The brothers decided to change that. Now when a slaver route went dark, people noticed. Because the silence came after an explosion and a blinking signal that read one phrase. Earth remembers. Jay stood in the middle of the main cargo bay, surrounded by crates of confiscated weapons and devices. Some were illegal. Some were rare. All were trophies. He catalogued them one by one, not out of obsession, but to remind himself of the scope. This wasn't just a few bad actors. This was a business model stretching across systems, built on the belief that no one would come looking. He knew what they were doing mattered, but the weight of it pressed harder each time they rescued someone who hadn't even realized how close they'd come to vanishing forever. Royce wasn't one to talk about pressure. He handled it by working longer, hitting harder, and sleeping less. He rewired their sensor arrays, installed decoy signals into their exhaust trails, and designed 3 different failsafes in case they were ever outnumbered. Colin, on the other hand, processed everything in silence. He studied patterns. He updated encryption. He didn't say much about their impact, but Jace could see it in the way he stared at holomaps with a fixed intensity. They weren't just reacting anymore. They were building a trap big enough to catch a fleet. The next message came encoded in a trade manifest. It wasn't even a distress call. Just a shipping order routed through 5 fake channels, listing a package labeled Terran Specimen Class 4. The destination was a private station orbiting a dead star. The sender was anonymous. The payment trail was erased. But Jace saw the phrase buried in the packet headers. Help us. They're coming. That was enough. They reached the coordinates within 12 hours. The star had collapsed centuries ago, leaving behind a drifting station powered by its own decaying orbit. It looked abandoned. No comm signals, no thermal readings. Just one ship docked to its side, a luxury cruiser built for speed and flash but modified for dark runs. Colin scanned the hull. Royce armed the breaching charges. Jace locked the NAV beacon and prepped the comm scrambler. They entered through a maintenance shaft and found the truth within minutes. It wasn't a holding facility. It was an auction floor. 10 prisoners. 2 of them human. 1 barely conscious. 1 already gagged and wired for transport. The rest were species Jace didn't recognize, but that didn't change the outcome. The brothers moved as one. Royce cleared the upper deck. Jace disabled the guards' weapons with a pulse EMP. Colin rerouted the station's power to trigger an emergency lockdown. In 6 minutes, it was done. They freed the captives, took their names, and dropped coordinates to friendly systems. No fanfare. No promises. Just freedom and fuel. The human girl they rescued never even asked who they were. She just cried, clutched her brother, and whispered thank you in a voice so quiet Jace almost didn't hear it. But he did. And he never forgot it. They didn't destroy the station. They turned it into a broadcast hub. Royce rewired the auction tech to stream intercepted slaver comms. Colin embedded a worm into the relay systems that flagged any known slaver vessel. Jace recorded a final message, standing where the auctioneer once stood. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He just stared into the camera and spoke the truth. You took from us because you thought we were scattered, weak, divided. You forgot what happens when family isn't afraid to burn down the sky to get one of their own back. We aren't heroes. We're not saints. But we are watching. And we're not alone. He ended the feed. They left the station running, fully powered, wide open. A trap? Maybe. A warning? Definitely. The galaxy would decide how to interpret it. But the brothers knew their work wasn't done. For every route they closed, another would open. For every crew they crushed, 2 more would get desperate. But none of that changed what they were willing to do. Because they weren't chasing an end. They were building a legacy of consequences. A week later, they picked up a weak signal from a drifting shuttle near a mining belt. A single voice, terrified, whispering coordinates and one sentence. "They're taking my son. Please. Anyone. Help." Colin adjusted course. Royce loaded ammunition. Jace checked his gear. No one asked if they should go. No one discussed strategy. They just moved. Because somewhere out there, another family was about to be torn apart. And the Wades knew exactly what that felt like. The hunt didn't need orders anymore. It was personal every time. In the void between stars, their ships vanished into warp. Silent. Focused. Relentless. The slavers had started something they couldn't finish. And now, the galaxy knew. When you steal from Earth, Earth doesn't call the authorities. Earth sends the brothers. The shuttle was barely holding together when they reached it. From a distance, it looked like just another scrap heap, another casualty of deep space scavengers or a failed jump gone wrong. But when their scanners picked up the faint emergency beacon, and when Jace filtered the signal through 4 layers of interference, the human voice returned, cracked and shaking, whispering the same words. "They took my son. I tried to fight. They're going to sell him. Please. Help." The coordinates were partial, buried in static, but it was enough. The Wade brothers didn't ask how recent the message was. They didn't calculate the odds. They locked onto the signal and went dark. The region was known as the Grey Fold, a cluster of rogue asteroids, dying stars, and signal-choking interference clouds. Smugglers loved it. Slavers used it for drops and handoffs. It was the kind of place where signals went missing and no one asked questions. Colin maneuvered the ship like he'd flown the terrain before. Royce disappeared into prep mode, arming close combat tools and recalibrating his armor for zero-G transitions. Jace sat with the audio on loop, listening to the broken father's voice, imagining what the boy must be going through. Every time the loop hit that last desperate word, help, he clenched his fists tighter. They tracked the signal to an asteroid-locked freighter, old model, retrofitted with slaver mods and high-speed scramblers. No IFF tag. No energy signature from the main drive. It was parked in the shadows of a fractured moon, its engines cold but still pulsing just enough to maintain gravity inside. That told them it wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Probably for pickup. Or worse, auction relay. Roy suited up first, checking the magnetic clamps on his boots and tightening the reinforced gauntlets on his forearms. Jace grabbed 2 short-range plasma blades and 1 EMP charge. Colin stayed on the ship's bridge, his focus split between jamming the slavers' external comms and scanning for additional threats. They weren't just here to rescue one boy. They were here to wipe this ship off every system map that recorded it. The breach was clean. Royce cut through the outer hatch using a silent burner, disabling the sensors before they could scream. Jace slipped through the opening and into the corridor like a shadow, moving low, quiet, mapping the layout in real time. The interior was worse than expected. Stained walls. Crude cages. Makeshift shackles welded to the floor. Royce signaled a 2 count, then slipped ahead to the bridge while Jace veered toward the cargo bay. The boy wouldn't be in the main holding cells. He'd be separated. Slavers like to tag young ones differently, treating them as high-value products. Jace found him in a locked room surrounded by automated drones. The boy was barely conscious, hooked to a nutrient 4 and wrapped in restraints too tight for his size. One of the drones spotted Jace and spun up a plasma turret. Jace moved faster, sliding under its line of fire and slicing the turret mount clean in one motion. The second drone activated just in time to be hit by Jace's EMP charge. The boy opened his eyes, dazed, confused. Jace whispered softly, "You're safe now. We're getting you out of here." Meanwhile, Royce reached the bridge and found the captain alone, watching footage from a surveillance monitor with a smug grin on his face. He didn't notice Royce until it was too late. Royce yanked him from the chair, smashed his face into the control panel, and jammed a blade into the comm override. The ship's systems began to crash one by one. Power dropped. Lights flickered. Artificial gravity hiccuped. That was the signal. Colin activated the extraction route, hacking into the slaver ship's NAV core and sending it into an auto-destruct countdown mast as a core test. Jace carried the boy through the darkening corridors, stepping over panicked slavers running for the escape pods. He didn't stop to fight. He didn't slow down. The mission wasn't about proving a point. It was about delivering a promise. He reached the breach point just as Royce returned, covered in ash but calm as ever. They reboard their ship, and within seconds, Colin jumped them out of the fold, leaving the slaver freighter behind just as it began tearing itself apart from the inside. The boy was stable but unconscious. Colin set course for a medical station in a nearby system while Royce deactivated the combat protocols. Jace sat by the boy's side, not speaking, just watching his chest rise and fall. He didn't know the kid's name yet. Didn't know how long he'd been on that ship. But he knew what it felt like to be alone and terrified, and he knew that from this day forward, the boy would never have to feel that way again. When the boy finally opened his eyes, he whispered something so faint Jace barely heard it. "Did you come for me?" Jace nodded. "Every time." The boy blinked, confused. "Are you the army?" Jace shook his head. "We're not the army. We're family." The boy looked at him for a long time, then fell back asleep. They dropped him off at the station 3 hours later, into the arms of a frantic father who had somehow survived long enough to make it there too. The man collapsed the moment he saw his son, sobbing into the boy's hair. The station staff didn't ask questions. They didn't have to. Everyone on that deck had seen the footage. Everyone knew who the Wades were. As the brothers returned to orbit, Colin watched the new footage upload automatically. Another slaver ship gone. Another name removed from the network. Royce leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing steady. Jace stood at the viewing port again, silent, watching the planet rotate beneath them. "You think it's enough?" he asked finally. Colin answered without looking up. "No. But it's what we can do." Royce opened one eye. "Until the next one." Jace didn't nod. He just stared ahead. The message had become more than fear. It was hope. Not loud, not flashy, but real. Somewhere out there, families were whispering the name Wade not with dread, but with relief. Somewhere, someone was holding on a little longer, waiting for a miracle with a human face. And that was enough to keep going. They didn't sleep much that night. They prepped the next route, checked their gear, and updated their intel board. A news signal came in before dawn. Another name. Another ship. Another chance to remind the galaxy that Earth remembers its own. And as the ship slid back into warp, all three brothers moved without speaking, bound by blood, driven by fire, and fueled by something no enemy could steal. Family.